if I think about it now, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, the enemy was he just wanted to take me out however he could in that time. But the Lord changed things. He gave me a word, in the midst of all that struggle. I mean, I was having suicidal thoughts. I was having all these sorts of things,
So how did that word come to you?
The word came in just seeking the Lord. Like, God, I give my hands up. I don't know why I came back to America. I have no idea what I'm doing. I was a missionary. My life feels like it should be in Japan because I have a call to Japan, but I'm back home and I don't know what to do at home. I'm trying to find work. I don't have enough money to be an independent family. So Lord, I don't know. You got to talk to me here. You got to speak. And the Lord gave me one word like this, Fukuoka. That's it.
Hi everyone, welcome to Thriving in Japan. And today, special guest, Stephen. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Hi, and the topic of Thriving in Japan, as everyone knows, is we want to encourage and build one another up. For those English speakers living in Japan, English speakers who love Jesus, either you came as a missionary with a purpose to serve God, to spread the gospel of the kingdom here in Japan, or after you came to Japan, maybe you became a Christian in Japan, or you got a vision for sharing the word during just normal life as a tent maker in Japan. So whoever you are, we want to encourage you, want to build you up. We want to see Christian brothers and sisters everywhere strengthened in the Lord and pursuing him and pursuing his kingdom. So Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself. We want to hear a little bit about your story, and we specifically today want to talk about finances. I think that's a big, huge issue for a lot of people. And we were talking the other day and realizing, we have lots of testimonies in this area. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to come upon this sticky topic. So anyway, before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to Japan and your heart for both God and bringing his kingdom here.
Well, I'll try to keep it to the brief version, but my wife is Japanese. We got married in America, and we moved to Japan in 2005.
Yeah.
So that was when I first, stepped into the place of, I'm going to live in Japan. God's calls into Japan. And even in that time, there are lots of different, scenarios and things we had to overcome financially to get to Japan. And I mean, there were miracles along the way financially and all different types of, God speaking and opening doors here and there. And so when we landed in Japan in 2005, again, it was by faith that God was going to give me a job and that we were going to get a place to stay and that families were going to get saved. I came just with that heart of like, okay, God sent me here to Japan, without a missions group, without, as a kind of an official sort of sending church. We had churches that were our home churches that were like, we're praying for you. We're sending you in the spirit, but they weren't like, we weren't fully funded even in that time. It was just basically almost, and I hate to use the term, but it always feels like crash land in Japan, find a job, get things and so that's how it started for me in 2005. And I got a job. God blessed me with a job and just getting into the culture and learning the language over the years. So where I could be fluent in the language. I was pretty good at it. I took a little bit in college, before I met my wife even. Now, in fact, that's how we met. We met through the culture club at college.
Okay. Where are you from again?
So, I'm originally from Southern California. The city is Oceanside, but San Diego is probably the closest place that most people know. Right. So we met there and got married there. I shared the gospel to you, me, my wife, and she came to faith. And she was the first person, I shared the gospel with, that, said yes to Jesus, and
nice.
So from that story, so that's how the story begins. The call to Japan was like packed in there. And so as, me and my wife walked more and, we were married 3 years until we moved to Japan. There was
just to back up on that, did you guys, were you planning on just like living in America without
Pretty much.
too many plans to come back to Japan, or what was how did that work?
Well, I mean, I had an interest in Japan, you know, in a way. Like I kind of wanted to see what life was like there, but it wasn't like a tangible, like, oh yeah, in 10 years, or we have some, you know, vision for living in Japan. That wasn't the case. I lived in Southern California. I had a job at a church, even working at a church and doing ministry. And, you know, I was doing three different ministries on a Sunday. I was literally in three different places doing different types of ministry on a Sunday in America. That's our life. And she was part of that. And it was International Christian Fellowship. And so it was that sort of, you know, like our life is here. We're international people, but we weren't thinking about just jumping on a plane and moving to Japan. But God made it happen. And it was a sudden thing. It was literally 6 months from the day the Lord told me, you know, I was sitting in my office. He just spoke to me. He says, what's it to you if I send you to Japan? You know, and at that time I was just beginning to walk in the kind of prophetic and learning how to hear God. And that just came into my spirit one day. And I said, okay, God, I'll do, of course I'll do what you want me to do. I'm here, you know. And then literally it's like all, you know, I hate to say all hell broke out, but I mean, these chaotic things started happening. But in the midst of the chaos, God was saying, that's how you're going to get to Japan. Like I literally lost my job after that. So it's like you said yes to God. All of a sudden you get a notification that, you know, from your boss that, hey, things are closing down. And you're just like, oh, I don't want to say I did it, you know, but you know, and like all these things. And then, you know, found out my wife's dad had cancer. I mean, these are all what you would call kind of negative things. And that's there was a sense of just urgency and everything. And then again, 6 months later, we were in Japan. So that's where the kind of giving you a context of my story. And this is the short version of where things started in 2005, and then just living in Japan.
So but when you came, you did feel a strong sense that this was God's timing, and both of you agreed together on the timing.
It wasn't like I was pulling her. She knew that. She's like, I told her that God spoke to me like that, and she's like, okay. And then boom, all these things started happening, and we couldn't deny this very clear, you know, shift in our lives, you know. And we had a little child. Our daughter was, you know, not even 1 year old yet at the time. There was a lot of it was rough. I mean, I want to say that, you know, there was things that happened that in the midst of all that movement where the enemy did get in and cause some trauma and things that we had to deal with. But it was still answering the call. And so I know that feeling from the sense of being a missionary. Like there is sometimes trauma that comes with the call. And so we had that, but we still, you know, God was so faithful to provide for our needs you know, throughout that time.
So as far as, okay, you had some churches back home that were willing to just pray with you and send you out, but financially speaking, your visa was spouse visa, right?
Yeah, it's spousal. And spousal, and get a job and just do a regular life in Japan. In a sense, learn what it's like to live in Japan.
Right. So what did you end up doing? What was English teaching or?
English teaching. Yeah. You know, and there would be certain people that I would go out and do, you know, the street music or those sort of things, you know, share my faith and with people at the park, or, you know, in kind of that friendship context. Because that's all I knew, really. I didn't know anything other than just talk to people about your faith and ask them what they think and have a dialogue like that.
Yeah. And you were originally, I think, was it Chiba you were in?
Yes, Chiba.
And then when did you guys move down to where you are now?
Fukuoka, well, actually, that took quite you know, we had the earthquake and the tsunami and all that, and the Fukushima, of course, meltdown and that. And I actually was suffering some health problems at the time, too, which caused me to really start to think, okay, God, what are we doing here? What, you know, and the Lord opened an opportunity for me to go back to America for about a year. And that had its challenges as well, to go back and, you know, in the sense of feeling like a failure, because I didn't see anyone come to Christ. I'll be honest, I was there for about 7 years, didn't see anyone come to Christ. Like, what was that all for? And then to go back home, and then people are, of course, like, you know, happy to see you, but like there was nothing that really happened beyond. I mean, obviously God used you. People want to believe that, but
sure.
Back, and then in the States, the Lord says Fukuoka. And this is
Right.
back in 2012. And I'm like,
So this is 2012. So hold on. So when you planned, did you plan on going back like for just a 1 year stint, or was that kind of
no,
like, oh, let's just move back?
let's just move back and see
Okay.
what, and because I feel the Lord leading that way. And there was a whole effort to bring us home, to provide for, the finances for that. And yeah, going back. So so the timeline is like this. So 2005, moved to Japan. 2011, big, 311, that big earthquake, that Fukushima meltdown. That year, suffering health problems, going through some things where just, all right, I think we need to move back to the U.S. Moved back at the end of 2011, basically crash land back. People raised money. They said, well, Steve and his family are going through a hard time. Let's get him back home. And then we got back home. And then it's like, okay, so we're here, I guess we're going to live in the States now. And at this time I have more kids, right? Remember now, started with one. Now at this point I have 4 kids, 4 little ones even, and, living at the parents' house and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then from there, looking, just kind of feeling for what I'm supposed to do now.
Yeah.
And then,
so tell us a little about that, because I think that's a really interesting experience that actually a lot of people have. A lot of people feel, obviously nowadays it's much easier going between nations than it used to be, back 100 years ago. Missionaries,
right.
They packed up for life. But nowadays, families, I know it is a huge logistical thing, but we do see people coming backwards and forwards. And what are the emotions like, and how did you deal with the emotions, even as a couple, with processing that? Do you know what I mean?
It was hard. It was hard because our life was in Japan for 6 years. Our kids were born in Japan. Obviously their language is mostly Japanese, very little English. But kids, resilient in that way. But we saw these just things that are like, all right, well, there's a lot of stress. I, in fact, actually began to suffer panic attacks.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, at the time, I lots of reasons, kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, because you were in an earthquake situation. And, again, I was hospitalized. I almost died in Japan. I almost died after I had an infection go into my brain from my blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was a crazy thing. One day I just was having lunch with my family, had a headache, and this is back in 2011, right? So after the earthquake, after the Fukushima meltdown and all that, and I just literally, had a headache so bad I lost the power of speech. I could not talk. Wow. And the went to the doctor. Doctor said, you got to get him to the hospital like right now. You don't even have time to call an ambulance, because they got to check and see, because he can't talk, and his, it was, and of course it was really bad. So, and I found out that it was an infection. It was handled, but I had to stay in the hospital for like 2 weeks. And so I had this kind of stuff happen along the way. And so it's like, you have all this stress, and whenever I just would feel overwhelmed, that you'd have this, panic attacks. You just really feel overwhelmed, and you just can't do anything, and you just start to black out.
Yeah.
And I was having those episodes in the States. And I'm just going, what's wrong? Do I have health problems? Again, and the devil plays on that. And of course, your marriage is like, Steve, okay. And I couldn't drive. And I mean, it was just, if I think about it now, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, the enemy was he just wanted to take me out however he could in that time. But the Lord changed things. He gave me a word, in the midst of all that struggle. I mean, I was having suicidal thoughts. I was having all these sorts of things,
So how did that word come to you?
The word came in just seeking the Lord. Like, God, I give my hands up. I don't know why I came back to America. I have no idea what I'm doing. I was a missionary. My life feels like it should be in Japan, because I have a call to Japan, but I'm back home, and I don't know what to do at home. I'm trying to find work. I don't have enough money to be an independent family. So Lord, I don't know. You got to talk to me here. You got to speak. And the Lord gave me one word like this: Fukuoka. That's it. The word Fukuoka. I didn't really know where Fukuoka was. I was like, where is Fukuoka? That's Japanese. I kind of knew it was a place in Japan. So I had to go, kind of look at it and go, oh, there it is. It's in the southern part. And that's all he gave me. And then I started to that changed my heart. That actually kind of delivered me, because there's a verse in the Bible that says he sent his word and he healed them. That's what I felt like. Okay, now I got a word. Now I just have to find out more about what that means, what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then of course God kept confirming every person I met who was Japanese in America was obviously from Fukuoka, or God
Okay.
it just got to the point where me and my wife now we're laughing.
Yeah. How did your wife, like this process of going back to America, and how did she handle this as well? I mean, she's leaving her own nation, of course, and how was that for her?
I think there was two parts to it for her. Like one is like obviously the leaving Japan is a sad sort of situation, and there's but she married me in America, and so she was planning to live in America anyway. So it's like, okay, here we go again. I guess the American life's gonna start going. Sorry, and so that is what I thought. She was very optimistic, but she did see that we were struggling, and she was probably puzzled, like, okay, why, if this is God and Steve's talking, or God's speaking to Steve, but it's not happening. What's up with this? And I felt we didn't really have arguments, but we would just sit there and cry. It was just like, that's how it would be.
You had a good, I mean, you were processing together the communication.
Yeah, we were just looking for something. I mean, it's just like, we just need something. And there were times it was fun. I mean, honestly, it was like, if we look at it with the perspective, like, we got to be serious and we've got to, get a house and all these things like all these other families, then it would get really stressful. But if we just thought of it, oh, this is a layover, this is, it's almost like when that word Fukuoka came, like, okay, well, God's going to do something, so let's just on him and let's enjoy being in America. That changed like our perspective. Oh, this is not, we're not going to try to build something because that becomes stressful on the marriage. And so we just kind of, all right, Lord, we're just submitting to what you said, and we're just grateful that we have food and a place to sleep, and we don't know how it's going to work. And there was a lot of other things moving on in the background, of course, financially and with relationships with my family, and stuff, and just the stress of having two families living under the same roof. And, that there was a whole bunch there that was really, that for her, obviously, is for anyone, right? Having to live with your husband's parents, in that situation, you don't have the freedom that you would do normally to raise kids or to cook meals and that sort of, and it's no one's fault, but that's just what the reality was. So there was that sort of stress happening in the background, but I didn't sense our marriage was, struggling from it. It was actually, we probably needed each other more.
Right. So you were able to pray together, able to focus together, bear each other's burdens.
Yeah, a lot of the time. Yeah.
That's good. So you were back for about a year, and you then, within 6 months, 8 months, you're making plans to come back again to Fukuoka.
Yeah, somehow to get to Fukuoka. And so it was obviously, looking for a job. I did at this time connect with a missions organization that would allow me to just, come under their covering and their sort of, financial, if people want to give. Now there's an avenue for giving to in Japan through that organization I met at the time, which I believe that was, that's God's, he's coordinating everything. And so we came back with a little bit more than just, us going to Japan. It was, we have, the missions organization that's sponsoring and saying, hey, this guy's with us. We have, of course, just the knowledge of being in Japan, of knowing what it's going to be like, especially for me living in Japan. Like, I know what I'm going back to, the second time around, it's like, I know what I'm going into, in fact, it's probably more familiar to me than my own country.
Sure.
Which is, a reality for a lot of people. It's like, I came when I was 24, 25. And so like my young days, my youth in that time, I don't even know what it would be like in America. I know Japan more. As far as like,
so
all this stuff.
Great. So you came back, found a place to live, got a job back in Fukuoka. What was life like on the ground there for you for the first while?
Again, another process of just going through a grinder of just finances. We were times we didn't have food, we didn't have AC, we didn't have these sort of things that, it was the hottest year on record in Fukuoka. I think in Japan, the year we didn't have an AC. I mean, it was just, I was like, what is this? It's literally going through the fire. I mean, I was pouring buckets of water on me to get to sleep at night. I mean, it was 38 degrees in our house.
Right.
Like, and I'm just like, and this is record breaking heat in Fukuoka.
Is this the house you're in still now?
Oh,
Same house?
no, it was a different place. It was
Yeah.
basically, we had a little two bedroom. We got at the time we had six in our family, but it was 2 bedrooms and a little. It's just very small, and
Right.
so
Right.
so it's a process again of just going through that. Like, all right, well, you're committing to the kingdom, but you're going through the trials,
Yeah.
not of maybe being just being stretched in your
Mm.
faith for finances, for physical things, just your physical strength, even raising the kids and believing for the
Yeah.
kids. And so we went through that again with Fukuoka.
Mm.
And then, we had some opportunities come our way for different types of work that allowed me to do both the church planning training, which is what the organization that I came with,
Mm.
to help church planning training in Japanese and help people who have a call to start a ministry, start churches,
Yeah.
to help train them, and also do some bridal work
Mm.
along with some freelance teaching, and just
Yeah.
combine all that to have a really solid income base at that
Yeah.
time. So God
Mm.
just he kept opening these great opportunities. So about our second, third year in Fukuoka, things were really starting to pick up, stabilize for us financially, stabilize
Mm.
for us with the kids, and then we got the house that we're living in now. Just a great
Mm.
just great place in the sense for just location wise. And in fact, the place we live is called Peace, and
Mm.
it's called that's the the kanji, it
Right.
means peace. It's heiwa. And so there's it's like the Lord was speaking in so many ways. I've given you
Yeah.
heiwa. I've given you a place in Fukuoka, and it's really
Nice.
it's amazing. And so, but in the midst of that, you're struggling. I still struggled with the flesh, my fleshly ways of thinking, my
Mm.
carnal reasoning, when it came to finances, when it came to all sorts of, even though I've seen, of course, a miracle. I know God will do a miracle when he wants to, but
Right.
how do I live the day to day, month
Right.
to month? Like what, I do need a job. That was my thought, is I do need
Yeah.
a job, because and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but that was just where my carnal mind was. I need to do that. I don't want to cause trouble for
Sure.
people. I don't want to cause my wife worry,
Yeah.
to say, okay, because I've seen her worried. I don't like it.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
Okay, that's great. Yeah, good to hear the background there, but also to fast forward a bit, and I guess where we wanted to go with our conversation today was talk specifically about finances, because I think what we've heard in the past is about the reasons why missionaries end up leaving, and you've experienced this yourself. Just family issues, relationship issues, finances would be the big three.
right.
Financial issues, and so about a year and a half ago, you guys gave up any paid work, regular paid work,
Yeah.
so that you could focus fully on ministry. And we're not, in all our conversations here, we're not saying one is better than the other. Of course, all we're saying is that God leads us in different seasons. And this has been I know I've walked a little bit with you through this process
Yeah.
as an outsider, and, just helping and praying and stuff. It's been, we're all on this journey with finances as well. So tell us a little bit about how you and Yumi decided to go full-time, just trusting the Lord for finances and stopping paid work.
Yeah. So for us, it was always, we don't want to be in a place where we're begging for money, and, we don't want to be in that place. And so working was just like, that's what we do. And then whatever God adds to that, we're going to do for ministry and things like that. And so it was a challenge in my own heart to say, okay, yeah, let's just trust God for everything. Like, just like that was, I heard stories about that, of course, about guys going to Africa and these, these kind of extreme, you've read books about it, George Mueller. I mean, so it's like, I'm not like unfamiliar with it, but it's like, how does that look for me in my life with my family? Well, first of all, the Lord had to speak, and he did. He spoke I want to say probably 2 years before it actually happened. I was in my office one day working, and the Spirit of God just, as you spend time with the Lord, just, you have a regular time of prayer. And one day, it was very strong. And I just got a piece of paper out and a pencil, started writing, and just the words coming out were just incredible things of, revival in Japan, demons being cast out, people being healed, miracles of all kinds happening, and that you will leave your job. I don't know why it just came out. My pen was out of control. My pencil was out of control. I'll be honest. And I mean, I don't even know if I've shared this with you, Jeff. It was like out of control. I just kept writing this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm just kind of like, I fold it in half and put it in my desk. It's like, kind of like, what did I just write? I'm like, I'm loving my job. I'm loving it. I'm getting to pray for Japanese couples and share the
right. That was that you were working at that time as a wedding,
bridal,
bridal on the weekend.
Yeah, doing that stuff, and a lot of missionaries do that, and I'm loving that job, and I don't know why I said it just came out when I was in the presence of the Lord, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna sit on that, and just but even the Lord says 2 years time. In 2 years time, that was in September, I believe, of 2016. Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, well, there's like a ticking time bomb there. So Lord, it felt like that. And I was like, well, I'm just going to I don't know, Lord, I'm just going to put that there. I'm not going to trash it. I literally left it in my desk for 2 years. But at the beginning of 2018, the Lord obviously says, Steve, look at that word, because at this point, everything that I wrote down was actually happening. Because in 2017, I did start to see healings, miracles and signs and wonders like I'd never seen before in my ministry. I was casting out devils. I've never seen that. I've never experienced that before. So everything I wrote that day, actually, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's happening.
Right.
And so this thing about the quitting the job thing, oh my, okay. So how, you know what I mean? So it's like, here we're following the sentence here. It's coming to that sentence. And so what is that? So I'm literally, I cannot get away from this. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So there's a level of that. It's just like, not a whim, like, oh, God will provide, I'm going to quit my job. It was like, I struggled with it. Like, God, but don't you want us to work? Don't you want us to be in a place where we can influence our workplace? These are the conversations I was having with God.
Right.
Because people were actually getting saved at the wedding place. So I'm like, isn't this, I mean, in your heart, you're thinking, well, this is a good thing, God, because, because people are getting saved or, hearing a word and this sort of thing. And I was just going back and forth with the Lord. So my heart, and he says, well, do you want the more? Do you want the more that's coming? And I'm like, yes. And then he just began to show me what that looks like, of just people, mass revival and being able to just take the Japanese to the nations, and that I would go to the nations, and that this revival is not just for Japan, it's for the nations, the people of the world. And do you want to be in the front of that? Do you want to be moving that forward? And I began to weep, and I said, yes. And that was back in 2018.
Right.
And so I had to tell my job and tell my wife, like, hey, this is
sure. Remind us again of like, how were your prayers and your discussions with your wife through this process so that you could move forward together?
Right. That's I wanted to say that, because so the way the discussions is like, I told her, I want to say back in 2017, kind of near the end or the middle, about like, hey, this is getting serious. I think God wants me to actually leave, because I mean, he said these things. And so she's just kind of like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? I get a job? And these sort of, and all I could say is, I don't know. I can't speak when the Lord hasn't spoken. So I just believe that people are going to fund us somehow, or, through different avenues, and just like, I don't know. I just said, honey, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. Does it look like someone giving us $1 million? I mean, that would be nice. That's sort of, a little bit pie in the sky thinking, like, it's just going to come,
Sure.
But here it is. But I can't deny that everything that was written is happening. Sure. And he's the God of the impossible. So let's like just wait and see how the timing works for these things.
And you basically, like you just said, you felt it was like within 2 years of receiving that vision. So it was 2018, October, end of September, beginning of October, you were deciding like full,
That's when I approached approached the people who I was employed at the time, and working with them, I told them this, hey, it's not an issue of money. It's not. It's just God's telling me I need to step out of this position. And
Hmm.
the first, they're kind of, they're a Japanese, company, and they're going to go, what are you talking about? A little bit. They're, what do you mean? And I've
Yeah.
explained that. And that was back in, the beginning of 2018, near the beginning of the year. So I gave them a lot of time. It's like, hey, this is,
Okay, it was a good amount of time.
yeah, a good amount of time to get somebody. And then the battle actually was to get to that point in my own
Right.
mind and with my
To be able
wife.
to actually say it
To
out.
actually go to your employer and say,
Wow.
I've got to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then to see the reaction. It's that whole dialogue. But that was, after that, it's a done deal. Like you've said it there. You've declared it. You're taking Goliath's head off. I mean, now you got to go do it. You know what I mean? It's just, you've declared it. Now it's like, boom, you got to go do it. And once you've done it, it's like, there, okay, it's God's going to be with you. So
Right.
I did feel that very strong confidence that I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I've got to draw the line.
Yeah.
And it did draw the line exactly how the Lord said. He says 2 years. That was back in September of 2016. So September 2018 to October is when I stepped out of that
And
sort of paid work.
Just as an aside, tell us, how did your kids? You have 5 children.
Yeah.
And were they involved in that, or how did you talk about that with them? And as a family, obviously you're praying together
right
for this new season.
I think they didn't really get the whole concept of what that means, and but the older ones obviously they understand. Oh, that means Dad's not there's not a regular sort of salary. But I steered clear from saying that means that you can't do this. I did say we need to be more careful about spending for certain things, and just be aware that why Daddy's doing this. And at this point, I had already told my kids things like, we'd supplied. We took, instead of buying Christmas presents, we're going to buy blankets for those people on the streets in India. And I had a ministry connection. So they've already, in a sense, they are prepared to like, oh, when we give up something for God, it's going to bless other people.
So they're being part of the blessing,
they've already kind of learned to walk in that way. But of course, they're still kids and they still want to go hang out and go to karaoke and, go buy, snacks for their friends and have a good time. Those sort of things. And I didn't want them to feel like they had to give that up, but just that we need to be aware of where, that it's not going to be how it was, in the sense of every time is the same amount.
Sure.
But God's always going to provide for us. And so that was the kind of dialogues we would have. I steer away from saying, phrases like, "Okane ga nai,"
this is a constant struggle. I think my boy's a bit older than your kids. So my oldest is 20, 18 and 15. And unfortunately, I feel like I might've left the impression on them that Christians are poor, and it's not, it's just like, we have so many testimonies, monthly, of God's faithfulness, even, while working in a paid job. The pay is up and down, as you know, with the bridal industry. It totally depends on the season and the month. And a lot of people are living like that. I think even, missionaries who have support, some regular support, and other that goes up and down. So you literally don't know each month how it's looking. But it's exciting to see God's faithfulness, even this month, again, just that the right amount at the end of the month. Unfortunately, though, in my comments and the way maybe I've given that impression to my kids that, oh, we're kitschy. What do you say, kitschy? And we're stingy.
Yeah.
You got to hold back. We can't be
go for the gusto.
I just really, that's one area that I think if I could go back, I would just be a lot more careful with my words, like how I communicated that with the kids, so as to get that balance where it's like, hey, look, I'm not saying that you every week we're going to go to USJ or something like that, but we're still being careful on these, because that's actually a part of my New Zealand culture, my own family. My mum was very, very frugal, but wanting to communicate the abundance and the what do you say, the faithfulness of God through all this.
Yeah, it's like the stewardship of the funds, but at the same time, yeah, so steward means that we never buy our kids nice things,
Right,
that they can't have, they have to have the bottom of the rung, when
right.
it comes to their clothes, or when it comes to the food that we buy, or, you know what I
Mm,
mean? So
mm,
that's where the struggle is, right? Because we want to be good, faithful stewards, and we don't want to be in excess,
right.
right? But at the same time, we need to be, yeah. So communicate to that, and it's an ongoing
Yeah,
struggle with the language we use, and sometimes
yeah.
it slips out. And I've actually had to say, in Japanese, "Tori keshimasu." I cancel that what I just said. Why? Because the
Yeah,
kids hear it. I'm talking to
yeah,
my wife, and then I see the kids hearing, talking about money or something,
yeah.
and I'm like, "Oops, no, I erased that. Erase that,
Yes,
guys, everybody."
that's
That's not
right.
how it is. But it's a challenge because there are needs, and especially in Japan, it's not a cheap place to live.
No,
Education costs are high. Kids are needing stuff for school. I mean, every week, I'll be honest, Jeff, every week I'm buying supplies for the kids for school, notebooks and paper and pencil, and they maybe want a little bit better one than this one. And so, I mean, these are the discussions. And so that in the midst of that, do we say, oh, we don't have money for that? I
right,
mean, realistically, I'm like counting the 1 yen coins, I'm like,
right.
oh, do we have enough? But when this one gets here, we save an extra 10 yen, but the kids need the other one. So it's just stepping into that place of, okay, God's going to provide, we're going to get the
Yeah,
better one. Just in that
yeah,
little day-to-day life, it's a
yeah,
test for us with the kids.
yeah,
And so even my wife has caught me just recently. She said, Steve, don't say that. Don't say okane ga nai. I'm like,
yeah,
I know. It just slipped out, honey. It's a bad thing. I know.
yeah.
We've got, right now, we've got, teimoto ni, ima motte nai.
Mm,
But we can go get some. You just have to ask Heavenly Father,
that's right. That's right.
And so, we have access to the funds. It just, right now, I just don't
Yeah,
have it in the bank account right
right,
now, but we're going to ask. And just
right.
having that optimism and the faith for it,
Yeah.
even in our discussions with each other as a couple and with the kids. But that's definitely, Jeff, I'm trying.
It's great. Hey, it's good to hear your story, and I want to continue this conversation. We're just going to take a little break for a minute here and continue in part 2 after the break. But as everyone knows, finances are a huge issue for every human being, for those of us in the kingdom as well. And we want to hear stories, testimonies. We want to look at, maybe in this next session, we're going to look at a few Bible verses and share and encourage specifically regarding keys to overcoming and thriving in the area of finance in Japan. So stay with us for part 2 in a minute.